The rain battered the roof of the old Victorian house in Astoria, Oregon, as if the sky itself were raging. Inside, 24-year-old Marcus Coleman stood frozen in the living room, his heart pounding so loud he swore it echoed off the walls. He just said the words he could never take back, "I'm gay." The silence that followed was heavier than the storm outside. His father, Gerald, a burly man with calloused hands from years at the lumber mill, stared at him, jaw tight, eyes unreadable. Marcus's grandmother, Evelyn, 78, sat in her armchair, her frail hands gripping a cup of chamomile tea, her gaze soft but fierce. Across the room, his grandfather, Harold, 80, leaned forward in his recliner, his voice sharp as a blade. "You're no son of mine if you choose this sin," he spat, his words slicing through the air. Marcus's world tilted. He'd known coming out wouldn't be easy, but he hadn't expected this. A family fractured in an instant. Evelyn stood, her small frame trembling but resolute, and placed herself between Marcus and Harold. "He's your grandson, Harold. You don't get to decide his worth." Gerald rubbed his temples, caught in the crossfire. "Dad, stop. This isn't your call," he said, but his voice wavered, torn between loyalty to his father and love for his son. Marcus's chest tightened. He'd grown up idolizing his dad, the man who taught him to fish in the Columbia River, who cheered loudest at his high school track meets. Now that same man looked at him like a stranger. The argument erupted like wildfire. Harold's voice boomed, quoting scripture, while Evelyn countered with quiet strength, her words rooted in love. "God made him this way, and God doesn't make mistakes," she said, her eyes locking onto Marcus's, giving him an anchor in the chaos. Gerald, pressured by his father's unyielding stance, finally snapped, "Marcus, you can't stay here if this is who you are. I can't have this in my house." Marcus felt the floor drop out. He grabbed his jacket, his vision blurring with tears, and stumbled into the rain-soaked night. The door slammed behind him, but not before he heard Evelyn's voice, fierce and unbroken. "You will not cast out my boy." He walked aimlessly through Astoria's quiet streets, the neon lights of the waterfront blurring in the downpour. His phone buzzed in his pocket, an unknown number. Hesitating, he answered. "Marcus? It's Javier, from the coffee shop. You okay?" Javier Morales, 25. The barista with warm brown eyes and a laugh that made Marcus's heart skip, had been a quiet crush for months. They'd talked during Marcus's shifts at the bookstore next door, their banter over book recommendations turning into something deeper, something Marcus hadn't dared name until now. "I'm not okay," Marcus admitted, his voice breaking. Javier didn't hesitate. "Meet me at the pier. I'm here." The pier was deserted, the rain relentless. Javier stood under a flickering street lamp, his hoodie soaked, his expression soft but determined. Marcus ran to him, and without a word, Javier pulled him into a hug. For the first time that night, Marcus felt safe. "You don't have to go through this alone," Javier whispered. Marcus clung to him, the weight of his family's rejection still crushing, but Javier's warmth was a lifeline. They sat on a bench, the ocean roaring below, and Marcus poured out everything. His dad's ultimatum, his grandfather's anger, his grandmother's defiance. Javier listened, his hand resting gently on Marcus's arm. "My family wasn't thrilled when I came out either," Javier said, his voice steady. "My dad didn't speak to me for a year, but you find people who see you really see you, and you build from there." Marcus looked at him, the rain streaking down Javier's face, and felt a spark of hope. "How do you do it? Keep going when it hurts like this?" Javier smiled faintly. "You find something worth fighting for, like us." The word hung between them, fragile but real. Marcus's breath caught. For the first time, He let himself imagine a future where he wasn't hiding. Back at the house, Evelyn sat Gerald down, her voice low but unyielding. "You're letting your father's fear control you, but you're better than this. Marcus is your son. You don't get to give up on him." Gerald's face crumpled, guilt warring with pride. Harold stormed out, unwilling to bend, but Evelyn's words planted a seed. Marcus spent the night at Javier's tiny apartment above the coffee shop, the two of them talking until dawn. Javier shared stories of his own journey, coming out to his Mexican-American family, navigating their expectations, finding solace in community. Marcus felt a flicker of strength, but the pain of his father's words lingered. Could he ever go back? Would his family ever see him for who he was? As morning broke, Marcus's phone lit up with a text from Evelyn. "Come home when you're ready. I'm here." He stared at the words, torn between fear and longing. Javier squeezed his hand. "You've got her, and you've got me. We'll figure this out." The rain had stopped, and the first rays of sunlight glinted off the wet streets. Marcus didn't know what came next, but for the first time in hours he felt like he could breathe. Marcus woke to the smell of coffee and the soft hum of Javier's voice singing a Spanish lullaby in the kitchen. The tiny apartment, cluttered with books and vinyl records, felt like a sanctuary compared to the storm of the previous night. He lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying his father's words. "You can't stay here if this is who you are." Each syllable stung, but Javier's presence dulled the edge. Javier appeared with 2 mugs, his smile warm but cautious. "You look like you need this," he said, handing Marcus a cup. Their fingers brushed, and Marcus felt a jolt. Not just attraction, but something deeper, like trust. "Thanks for letting me crash," Marcus said, his voice hoarse. Javier sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You do the same for me. Besides, I like having you here." They talked over coffee, the conversation weaving between light and heavy. Javier shared how he'd found a chosen family in Astoria's small but vibrant queer community. A group of artists, activists, and baristas who met at the local bookstore for open mic nights. "You should come to one," Javier said. "It's not perfect, but it's home." Marcus nodded, the idea both thrilling and terrifying. He'd spent years hiding, afraid of being seen. Now, with nowhere to go, maybe it was time to try. Meanwhile, at the Coleman house, Gerald sat at the kitchen table, staring at Marcus's old track trophies. Evelyn shuffled in, her slippers soft against the hardwood. "You didn't sleep," she said, not a question. Gerald sighed. "I don't know how to fix this, Ma. Dad's got his mind made up, and I don't know what I believe anymore." Evelyn sat across from him, her eyes sharp despite her age. "You believe in your son. You just forgot how to show it." Gerald's phone buzzed. A text from Harold. "Don't let him back. You know what's right." Gerald's grip tightened. His father's voice had always been the loudest in his life, a guiding force through his own childhood in rural Oregon. But Marcus's face, pale and broken as he'd left, haunted him. Was he really ready to lose his son? Marcus and Javier walked to the bookstore, the morning air crisp with the scent of pine and salt. The shop, a cozy haven called Pages by the Sea, was alive with color. Rainbow flags in the window, shelves packed with queer literature. Marcus hesitated at the door, but Javier's gentle nudge pushed him inside. There, they met Lila, a 30-year-old non-binary artist with bright purple hair and a contagious laugh. "Javi's new friend, huh?" they said, winking. "Welcome to the chaos." Lila introduced Marcus to the group, a mix of ages and backgrounds, all bound by the courage to live authentically. Marcus felt out of place but stayed, drawn to their warmth. When Lila read a poem about loving against the odds, Marcus's throat tightened. He saw himself in the words, in the defiance of fear. Javier caught his eye, and Marcus felt a pull, like gravity, toward something new. That afternoon, Marcus's phone rang. Evelyn. Your dad's struggling, but he's thinking. Come to dinner tonight. Just you and me if it feels safer. Marcus hesitated, torn between the safety of Javier's world and the pull of home. I'll think about it, he said, his heart racing. Dinner at the Coleman house was tense. Harold refused to join, staying in his study, but Gerald was there, quieter than usual. Evelyn served her famous pot roast, the familiar scent grounding Marcus. I'm not here to fight, Marcus said, breaking the silence. I just want to be me. Gerald looked down, his fork still. I don't understand it, he admitted, but I don't want to lose you. The words were small, but they cracked something open in Marcus. Evelyn squeezed his hand under the table. That's a start, she said. But as Marcus left, he saw Harold watching from the window, his face hard. The battle wasn't over. Back at Javier's, Marcus shared what happened. Javier listened, then pulled him close. You're doing the hard part, he said. Showing up as you are. Their lips met, tentative at first, then sure. A kiss that felt like a promise. Marcus's heart soared, but fear lingered. Could he build a life when his family was still so divided? The next week was a blur of small victories and lingering shadows. Marcus spent his days with Javier, helping at the coffee shop and joining the bookstore's queer book club. Each laugh with Lila, each quiet moment with Javier, felt like stitching together a new version of himself. But at night, alone on Javier's couch, the memory of his father's ultimatum and Harold's cold stare gnawed at him. One morning, while steaming milk for a latte, Marcus overheard a customer mention a local pride event, a small festival on the waterfront. Javier grinned, tossing a dish towel over his shoulder. We're going, he said, not asking. Marcus hesitated. What if someone sees me? Like my dad? Javier's eyes softened. Then they see you living. That's not something to hide. The festival was a riot of color. Rainbow flags, glitter, and music pulsing through the crowd. Marcus, wearing a borrowed pride pin from Lila, felt exposed but alive. Javier held his hand, their fingers laced, and for a moment, Marcus forgot his fear. They danced to a local band, their bodies close, the world fading away. Lila snapped a photo, capturing their joy, and Marcus felt a surge of defiance. This was who he was. But the moment shattered when Marcus spotted a familiar figure. Gerald, standing at the edge of the crowd, watching. Marcus froze, his hand slipping from Javier's. Gerald's face was unreadable, but he didn't approach. Instead, he turned and walked away. Marcus's stomach dropped. He saw me, he whispered. Javier pulled him close. That's his problem, not yours. Back at the house, Gerald wrestled with what he'd seen. Marcus, happy and free, didn't match the image Harold had painted. A life of shame and ruin. Evelyn found him in the garage, tinkering with an old radio. You saw him today, didn't you? She said. Gerald nodded, his voice low. He looked okay. Happy even, but Dad says. Evelyn cut him off. Your father's wrong. Marcus isn't broken. You're breaking him by pushing him away. Gerald's resolve wavered, but Harold's influence was ironclad. That night, Harold cornered him. You let him parade around like that, you're no better than he is, he said. Gerald snapped back. He's my son, Dad. Not a disgrace. It was the first time he challenged Harold directly, and it left him shaken. Marcus, meanwhile, leaned into his new community. He started writing poetry, inspired by Lila's open mic nights, pouring his pain and hope into words. One night, he read a piece about his grandmother's strength, his voice trembling but clear. The crowd cheered, and Javier's proud smile lit something inside him. You're incredible, Javier said later, kissing him under the stars. Marcus felt whole, but the ache for his family lingered. Evelyn called again, her voice urgent. Your dad's coming around, but Harold's doubling down. Come talk to him, please. Marcus agreed, his heart pounding. At the house, Gerald was quieter, his eyes tired but softer. I don't get it, he said, but I'm trying. Marcus nodded, tears prickling. It wasn't acceptance, but it was something. Harold, however, was unrelenting. You're spitting on everything we built, he told Marcus, his voice cold. Evelyn stepped in, her voice like steel. You're the one tearing this family apart, Harold. Not him. The room crackled with tension, and Marcus left, unsure if his grandfather would ever bend. That night, Javier held him as he cried. You're enough, Javier said, with or without them. Marcus clung to those words, but the weight of his family's divide pressed harder. Could he keep fighting for a place in a home that might never fully welcome him? The weeks blurred into a rhythm of hope and tension. Marcus split his time between Javier's apartment and the bookstore, finding solace in the community that embraced him. He and Javier grew closer, their relationship a quiet anchor. Late-night talks, shared playlists, stolen kisses in the coffee shop's backroom. But the shadow of his family's rejection loomed, especially Harold's unyielding stance. One evening, Lila invited Marcus to an art show featuring queer artists. His poems, now a stack of scribbled pages, had caught their attention, and they wanted to display one alongside their paintings. Marcus was floored. Me? Really? Lila grinned. Your words hit hard. They belong here. The show was a whirlwind of color and emotion, and seeing his poem framed on the wall, words about love and resilience, made Marcus feel seen in a way he'd never imagined. Javier stood beside him, beaming. You're building something real, he said, squeezing Marcus's hand. As they left the gallery, the Pacific breeze cool against their skin, Marcus felt a surge of courage. He wanted to fight for this life, but he couldn't shake the pull of home. He missed his dad's laugh, Evelyn's stories, even the creaky old house. At the Coleman house, Gerald was unraveling. Harold's constant pressure, daily lectures about family values, clashed with Evelyn's quiet insistence that love was the only value that mattered. One night, Gerald found an old photo album filled with pictures of Marcus as a kid, grinning on his bike, hugging Evelyn at Christmas. His heart ached. He'd been so focused on Harold's expectations that he'd forgotten his own. Evelyn caught him staring at the photos. You're losing him, Gerald, she said softly. Not because of who he is, but because of what you're choosing. Gerald's voice cracked. I don't know how to stand up to Dad. He's always been everything. Evelyn's eyes blazed. Then be everything for your son. The breaking point came at a family dinner Marcus reluctantly attended. Harold dominated, his voice booming about tradition and shame. Marcus, emboldened by Javier's support and his new community, finally spoke. I'm not ashamed of who I am. I'm ashamed of how you're treating me. The room fell silent. Gerald's hands shook, and for the first time he spoke up. Dad, enough. Marcus stays. This is his home. Harold's face reddened, but Evelyn's proud nod gave Gerald strength. Marcus's eyes welled up, caught off guard by his father's stand. It wasn't full acceptance, but it was a crack in the wall. Harold stormed out, muttering about betrayal, but Gerald stayed, looking at Marcus with something like regret. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I'm trying. Marcus nodded, his throat tight. That's enough for now. He left the house feeling lighter, but Harold's absence cast a shadow. Could his grandfather ever change? Back at Javier's, Marcus shared the night's events. Javier listened, then pulled him into a slow dance in the living room, music soft in the background. You're so strong, Javier murmured. Marcus laughed through tears. Only because you're here. Their kiss was fierce, a promise to face whatever came next together. But the peace was fragile. Marcus knew Harold's influence still lingered, and Gerald's shift was tentative. The fight for his place in his family and in the world was far from over. Spring arrived in Astoria, the town blooming with possibility. Marcus, now a regular at the bookstore's events, had found a rhythm. His poetry was gaining traction, and he'd started a part-time job at Pages by the Sea, shelving books and planning open mic nights. Javier was his constant, his partner, his cheerleader, his home. Their love, once tentative, was now a quiet force, grounding Marcus through the uncertainty. But the Coleman house remained a battleground. Gerald's stand against Harold had shifted the dynamic, but Harold's silence was deafening. He'd retreated to his study, refusing to engage, his disapproval a heavy presence. Evelyn, ever the bridge, kept Marcus tethered to the family, inviting him for Sunday dinners. Gerald was trying. Awkward questions about Javier, hesitant smiles, but the gap between them wasn't fully closed. One afternoon, Marcus found a letter slipped under Javier's apartment door. It was from Evelyn, her handwriting shaky but clear. "Harold's sick. He won't admit it, but he needs you. Come home." Marcus's heart sank. He hadn't spoken to his grandfather since the dinner, but the thought of losing him stirred a complicated grief. At the hospital, Harold lay frail in a sterile bed, his stubbornness softened by illness. Marcus stood at the door, unsure. Evelyn nudged him forward. "He's scared," she whispered. "Show him who you are." Marcus sat beside Harold, the silence heavy. Finally, he spoke. "I'm still your grandson. I love you, even if you don't get me." Harold's eyes, cloudy with age, met his. For the first time, they held no anger, only exhaustion. "I don't understand your life," he said, his voice weak. "But I don't want you gone." It wasn't acceptance, but it was a start. Marcus squeezed his hand, tears falling. Evelyn smiled, her strength the glue holding them together. Gerald, watching from the doorway, joined them. "I'm proud of you, Marcus," he said, the words clumsy but real. "I should have said it sooner." Marcus nodded, overwhelmed. The family wasn't whole, but it was healing. Months later, Marcus and Javier stood on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, the same spot from their first night. The sunset painted the sky in pinks and golds, and Javier slipped a ring onto Marcus's finger. A simple band, a quiet promise. "We're enough," Javier said, echoing their early days. Marcus kissed him, the ocean roaring below, their love a testament to resilience. At the Coleman house, Gerald hung a pride flag in the window, a small gesture that meant everything. Harold, recovering slowly, didn't protest. Evelyn, ever the heart of the family, watched Marcus and Javier visit, their laughter filling the house. The road hadn't been easy, but it led here, to love, to family, to a life worth fighting for. Marcus's poetry book, published by a local press, sat on the bookstore's shelves, its dedication simple. "To Evelyn, who shielded me, and Javier, who showed me the way." The words were a beacon, a reminder that love, in all its forms, could triumph over fear.